When you think about conflict resolution, most of us don't like conflict. We just don't. We'd rather not. We'd rather um, go about our lives without having to deal with any type of confrontation, being upset with someone, having a disagreement, having somebody yelling and screaming at us, being mad. We could just do without it. We would rather not have conflict. But the reality is, we are going to have to deal with conflict. We're going to have to learn how to resolve conflict. If not, it's going to make us sick because we'll be dealing with all these emotions underneath the surface. So we want to make sure we know how to deal with conflict. And so I've been thinking a lot about conflict and what I've done in the past to resolve it, and what's the best way to resolve conflict, and how do you deal with it if your personality is non-confrontational. What do you do? How do you deal with things that are happening, things that are going to happen that are completely out of our control, because we can't control anybody else, right? We can have a good attitude, be positive. We can make sure that when we approach this person, when we're with this person, that we have the best intentions towards them, that we have our thoughts are positive towards them. But the reality is that conflict is going to happen. And so we've got to be prepared. We got to know ahead of time. We got to be thinking ahead of time. Okay, when something happens that I don't like, or if somebody approaches me about something that I did to them they don't like, what do I need to do? So I came up with this Take 5 framework. So I just want you to think about this. I want you to consider this the next time you are dealing with conflict or find yourself right in the middle of conflict. It's a Take 5 framework. Take 5. So I want you to think about this. Take 5. And so the most important thing when we are in the middle of conflict is to stop. So number 1 is stop. Stop whatever you're doing. Just stop for a minute. Just stop so we can give our brain a chance to catch up, so we can start thinking about it logically. Because when we don't stop and think, we do stupid stuff. We're yelling, screaming, cursing, saying things we can't take back. So the first thing we got to do is stop, and we got to make a conscious decision that we're going to stop. The second thing is breathe. We got to stop and just take some deep breaths so we can gain some composure, so we can just get right. I say, so we can get back in our right mind, because we can get angry and then we can be completely out of our mind. And then after the fact, we're wondering, what happened? What was going on? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? I didn't mean that. So we want to stop, breathe, so we can get in our right mind. And then the third thing is we want to think. We want to think about what is happening. What just happened? We want to stop and think. We stop and think because we want to make sure that we are not going to say the wrong thing. We want to stop and think because it could be us. We could be the problem. We could be the cause of what happened. We could be in the wrong. So we stop and think. And the fourth thing is we ask ourselves, okay, how am I feeling? How am I feeling? And then why am I feeling this? How am I feeling? And then why am I feeling this? Because sometimes we think that it's the person that we're in conflict right then. But sometimes it's something happened at home before we left and we didn't say anything. Sometimes it's something that our kids said to us that hurt our feelings and we didn't say anything. Sometimes the phone call before this conflict that really caused this. So we got to stop and ask ourselves, how am I feeling and why? And then the last thing is, what happened? What happened with this situation that you're in right now? What happened? We got to ask ourselves what happened. So oftentimes we get into conflict and we're like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we haven't stopped to ask ourselves anything. We just go at it with the person. And we don't realize that we damage relationships. Sometimes we say stuff we can't say, we can't apologize away. So we want to make sure that we stop. We want to make sure that we breathe. 3 is we got to think. 4 is we got to ask ourselves, how am I feeling? How am I feeling and why? And then the last thing is we want to ask ourselves, what happened? So what happened between you and this person? 4 is we want to ask, why am I feeling this way and why? So this could be something that happened before. This could be an argument you had last night. It could have been you were drinking last night. It could have been you overate last night and it affects your mood right now. It could be so many things. So you just want to make sure you want to check in with yourself. And then you want to ask what happened between you and this person. Sometimes we have a disagreement with somebody. We have conflict because we have unresolved issues with them. Something they said, snide remark, they were sarcastic. It upset upset us and we just let it go, instead of saying, what you said to me was, I felt was offensive before now. And so now they've said the slightest little thing and we're upset and we're back and they trying to figure out what happened. And so we got to make sure we deal with things appropriately. And I always say 24 hours, 48 at the longest, but try to deal with things right away, because if you don't, it just makes things horrible in the future. So just some things to be thinking about when you're trying to when you're working on resolving conflict, is that we got to stop just going in, talking to somebody, yelling and screaming, doing all this silly stuff, saying things we can't take back. We want to make sure we're stopping, we're thinking about this, because we're adults, we're mature adults, we're not children. So we want to make sure we're acting accordingly, and knowing too that adults are going to have conflict, because nobody can be perfect, and we have different emotions, we have different outlooks, different experiences, different attitudes, different ideas, different thoughts, different culture, all these different things. And so conflict is going to happen. So we just got to ask ourselves, we got to start thinking about things logically beforehand. We got to ask ourselves, when we're in contact with people, do we have unresolved issues? Do I have unresolved issues with this person that needs to be dealt with right now? And so if you don't resolve the issues before, you'll find yourself in conflict in some way, because we think that we let it go. That sarcastic remark, we think we let it go, but we didn't. And it'll come up later. So just think about, do you have issues that need to be resolved? If so, do it. If not, when conflict happens, you have this 5-step framework that you can just think about. Stop, breathe, think. Ask yourself, how am I feeling and why? And then what happened? So think about this and work to resolve conflict right away. Don't let it fester. Don't let it grow. Don't let it go on months and years. Resolve it right away.